got to be the senior writer. Not that he's old or anything. I'm just saying, like, he's the man.
Yeah.
The myth, the legend, covering your 49ers for The Athletic, Matt Barrows. Good morning, Matt.
Morning, guys.
How are
That's
you?
a senior citizen writer. That's my official title.
Yeah, here we are on a Monday, and I don't know. I was opining earlier, Matt. I'm curious as to what you think. Beyond the intricacies we'll get into about this loss, is this kind of like what we've expected earlier with all the injuries, and it just kind of reared its head yesterday, or did this even surprise you?
No, I mean, this is what you would expect from a team that's been racked by injuries and that's leaning on youth the way the 49ers are. I think that they are now in that chunk of teams in the middle of the NFL, the mids, if you will. And when you're a mid team, you have swings like this. You look great one week and you win and you think, wow, we're pretty good. And then the following week you go to Houston and you get your what's beat, and you sort of kind of vacillate between the two. And you see that with the Falcons did that as well. They beat the Buffalo Bills, and then they lose to the 49ers, and then the Texans lose badly to the Seattle Seahawks, and then they beat the 49ers. So they're part of that group of teams. And so the question is, in the second half of the season, can they pull out of that mid section of the league? And I think that there are arguments to be made for both, whether they can and they cannot. They're about to have a whole bunch of people come back over the next month, say. And so the question is, by the time you get to December and you're in the home stretch of the season, are you, one of the better teams in the NFL? Are you still one of the middle teams, or did those guys who came back, make any difference at all? Did other guys get hurt? Are you sort of lagging at the bottom?
Matt Barrows joining us from The Athletic, brought to you by Stockton Honda. Matt, we've said for years that any Kyle Shanahan 49er team, to me, it's like the perfect day is they get ahead. The terms of the game are they have control of that. The other team's playing catch up. They rely on special teams, defense, and certainly their offense. There was none of that yesterday. They were playing catch up all the game. They hardly had the ball. That was one of the more bizarre first halves I can ever remember, of just the disparity of time of possession. How crazy was that?
Yeah, it was. They just couldn't get off the field. And third down had been, what was sort of keeping them in the running this year. They've been really good on third down, both on offense and on defense. And obviously that was not the case yesterday. It was weird. Every time the Texans ran the ball, 49ers would stop them at the line, but not get them down. So, whether it was Woody Marks or Chubb, they would hit the line, get stopped, and then bounce off and gain 5 or 6 yards. And so then you're in a second and short, and it's an easier conversion. And that's what they did up and down the field. The 49ers kept them out of the end zone in that first half largely, but they weren't doing anything on offense either. So they won special teams, but they lost handily the other two facets of the game.
Matt, Chris McCaffrey, easily the game he's been most shut down on both sides. 43 yards receiving, just 8 rushes for 25 yards. Let's move the receiving to the side, because that's a completely different subject. When you look at the Niners rushing, 8.25 for McCaffrey, then add in 2 and 23, a 13-yard scramble for Mac Jones, 10 rushes, 48 yards, which is highly uncharacteristic of a Kyle Shanahan team that he would normally put out there. How much of that was on the Niners side, and how much of that do you think was due to the Texans being so effective?
Yeah, I think that was largely due to time of possession. I didn't think that. There were a couple of bad runs in there that didn't go anywhere. But I thought that, if the time of possession were even or close to even, by the third and fourth quarter, McCaffrey would have been gaining larger chunks. I think his average was 3.1 yards, which isn't great, but it's not putrid either. But there is something to be said about the Texans defense, and that's that they have good linebackers, and you can't really say that about a lot of teams in the NFL. And the Kyle Shanahan offense kind of gobbles up bad linebacking teams. That's sort of the focus of that offense is to take advantage of linebacker play. It's if you get two small and quick guys out there, then you run the ball against them. If they're bigger plotting guys, then you match George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey against them in the passing game. I thought that the Texans linebackers were really good yesterday, and one of them is an ex-49er.
Yeah.
So there are two teams that seem to know what they're doing with the linebacker group, and you would expect that on a team that's coached by a former linebacker like DeMeco Ryans.
Matt, you'd mentioned earlier that the 49ers are expecting to get some more guys back. We've seen Kittle back now for a couple of weeks. Is one of those guys Brock Purdy? He's been out longer than I think a lot of people thought he would be.
Yeah, I think there's guarded optimism that he's back for this upcoming game against the Giants. We watched him on Friday, and very brief kind of glimpse of practice on Fridays, but the glimpse did include him sort of working off by himself and doing some things like he was sprinting, he was stop and go, he was hopping on one foot. And I could just tell from his body language that he was happy with how his body was responding. And so when practice started in earnest, he ran over to the quarterback group and got in with them. But it just seems like he has made some progress. He was actually on the road for this game and hadn't been for Tampa and LA before that. So that alone, I think, makes is an indication that the medical staff feels like that toe is healed enough that it's not going to be affected by a 3-hour flight to Houston. So I think all of that points to we'll have to wait on Wednesday to see whether he's limited or full go. I think the Thursday practice is the one to really watch because he could be limited on Wednesday, more of a kind of wait and see how the toe reacts. And if it's all good, then maybe he's full go on Thursday. And if he's full go on Thursday, I think he's the starter in New York.
Matt Barrows joining us. Matt, who am I? I'm thinking Pearsall, Brandon Aiyuk. I imagine I'm missing somebody or a couple people or 20 players, but you were just kind of giving us an injury update on Brock Purdy. Would you mind continuing that on with the receivers, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that Pearsall is in the same category. If it's not this week, it's the next week against the Rams. And then, the big news on Friday was that Kyle Shanahan said that Brandon Aiyuk is now in a kind of week-to-week situation as far as opening his practice window. So that theoretically could happen this week. He wouldn't play in New York. I think that the 49ers would, use most, if not all, of that 3-week kind of walk up to when they have to make a decision on him, have to activate him. But I mean, it just shows that, I think a month is a reasonable timeline now for when he gets back onto the field. And so then we're going to have to go through when's he going to become the real Brandon Aiyuk? And it's going to take time for that to happen. But again, my point is that by December, 1, this should be or could be probably the best way to phrase it, a different team, a different quarterback, your tight end, all your receivers are in the game. You've got Christian McCaffrey. It could be a good team. So, with the trade deadline coming up, the question is, okay, do you kind of sacrifice future picks for a team that right now, as we just, established, is sort of a middle of the road at best team, but one that could become a lot better in a month and a half.
And I want to follow up on Aiyuk. As a Niner fan, and I make no bones about it. I find myself vacillating because I am really excited to get Brandon Aiyuk back, and then I get a little too excited and think, well, we can get Purdy back and this and Aiyuk, and now it's let's go. But then there's a little part of me that stops and goes, before Aiyuk got injured last year, it's important to remember he wasn't exactly banging it up. He had 147 yards on 8 catches against Arizona October 6th, but Matt, 2 catches for 37 yards, 2 catches for 23 yards, 2 catches for 48 yards, 5 catches for 48, 43, 28. Going back, he was having, I think, his worst regular season of his life before that injury. Is there any optimism off of that? Maybe I'm missing something that happened last year before the injury, or is it a coin flip when he comes back as to which Aiyuk we're getting?
Yeah, no, I think it's a coin flip. I mean, I wouldn't expect much from the early Aiyuk that you see out there. And it's because last year he didn't practice.
Yeah.
That was the contract year where he was holding out or holding in, as it were, and just wasn't out there with Brock Purdy. And so it led to this stuttered start for him. And so he's been out even longer now with an injury, no less. So I don't think that you can expect him to be any better than last year's early season Brandon Aiyuk initially. Now, whether there's enough runway for him to kind of get going, I don't know. But, I mean, you're seeing that with Juwan Jennings, too. He was injured for most of training camp. He's been injured for a lot of the regular season. He does not look like peak Juwan Jennings, which is the Juwan Jennings we saw last year. Bottom line, all of these guys, it's hard to think that they can hit full throttle right off the bat, because now Pearsall has missed more than a month as well. So, like I said, November I think is still going to be dicey, but by December you can kind of see them gelling to a point, and this is, by the way, if everyone remains healthy.
Right.
And it's very, very hard to expect that given what we've seen over the first 8 games. But if that were to happen, or, they're so talented that even if it's just 3 or 4 of these guys that we're talking about that do string together a month and a half together at practice, in games, etc., you would think that by December they could have something going.
Matt, yesterday, a guy that had been rumored to be, targeted for the 49ers as Trey Hendrickson left that game against the Bengals. Is still your belief that that's probably the number one point of emphasis, is to get some more help up front defensively for this team come trade deadline time?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's very much in play. At this point, it's a matter of bodies. Jordan Elliott went down with an ankle injury. Sam Okuano went down with an ankle injury yesterday. Alfred Collins had to leave the game briefly with a shoulder injury. I think he's okay. But my point is that, they're already brought up 2 guys from the practice squad for this game. I mean, they're running out of defensive linemen. So at some point they have to bring in somebody just to kind of suit up. But, more to the point, it's that a lot of these guys, they're playing more snaps than you would want. I mean, Collins played, I wrote this down, 54 snaps yesterday. Michael Williams played 53. We saw Bryce Huff playing a lot more in recent games than he did early in the season, and lo and behold, he comes down with a hamstring strain. Williams is having to play more defensive end, where I imagine they would want him to be rushing the passer on obvious passing down from defensive tackle. I'm just saying that even if you just bring in one guy, it lessens the snap count. It allows people to play in the positions that they were designed to play in when the season began. I just think that there's a domino effect, even if it's an Arden Key. I think that would be a significant addition to that defensive line.
Matt, it's a real interesting 5-game stretch before the bye week coming up. They go to New York to take on the Giants, which was that, am I right? Wasn't that where Bosa initially hurt his knee years ago?
Yeah, in 2020.
That's right, in 2020. So bad memories there, but the Giants also suffering a huge loss with our very own Cam Scatterbo out for the year. Then it's back home for a revenge game for the Rams against the Niners at Levi. Then Arizona, Carolina, Cleveland before the bye week, and then they get Tennessee before the Colts. So real interesting stretch where you could argue they'll probably be favored in 4 of those 5 games, and if that followed through, they're 9-4 going into the bye with Tennessee at home coming out of it. So how, in your opinion, how much of their wins and losses over the next few weeks is going to dictate John Lynch's aggression, or does he know he needs to do something no matter what?
I think it's the latter. I mean, there's only one more game before the trade deadline, the one in New York. And, I guess you could argue that if they have another catastrophic injury, guys out for the year, key guy in New York, which isn't out of the realm of possibility given the location and given this team's snake bit luck this year, that would cause him to kind of pull back on a trade. But like I said, I mean, they're just so beat up along the line, even the guys that are playing. I mean, you see Kalia Davis batting down a pass with his good hand, and then the camera shows him with his giant club on the other hand. So, he's got a broken hand. Mykel Williams has a wrist injury. CJ West has a broken thumb. There are guys out there right now who are beat up. So, like I said, having even one quality guy in the lineup, saving a Mykel Williams, 8 snaps a game, I think that's significant. Because at some point you're going to get to a point where these guys are just kind of spinning their wheels. I mean, the guys that I'm mentioning, Collins and Williams, are both rookies. They've already played a college season almost. And they're going to be getting into that rookie wall stage. And just don't know if you're, even the development is sort of affected by that at that point. So I just think that it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for the fan base for sure, and probably the right thing to do as far as the development of these young guys, which seems to be a priority for this team.
Matt, just to do a little division check-in on the NFC West, the division basically had the bye besides the 49ers, and now just a half game back. The good news is they've played them all already and beaten them all, so they'll have a second run through. As you look at it, I would have guessed it's obviously between the Rams and the Seahawks. Who do you think the Niners think is their biggest competition as they go the rest of the way?
Well, the Rams are their twins. So, the two organizations are very similar. Philosophy, they always go after the same guys. They're probably going after the same trade guys right now and sort of upping the cost of their trade targets. So I would think that they feel like it's the Rams at this point. But the Seahawks are good. I mean, look at what they did to the Texans versus what the 49ers did to the Texans. The Seahawks defense is playing really well, and they may have the best wide receiver in the NFL right now.
Matt Barrows of The Athletic, each and every week, breaks down the 49ers winning or losing regardless. He shows up, and we appreciate that. Matt, thanks for the time. Make sure you look for Matt's pieces in The Athletic. Subscribe and save right now, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Talk to you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
You got it, brother. Thank you. That is Matt Barrows. And yeah, man, I don't want to get too high or too low with this team. It's tough to do.
Right.
I think that regardless.
They're in okay shape.
Yeah. Regardless of that loss to Houston.
Yeah.
They, because of injury,